So I want to get the ball rolling. And as the founder of Story Origin, I have to use my pun. So, Danica, what is your origin story?
Yeah, so my origin story is that I have always been a writer. I was that kid who would like take the extra sheets of notebook paper and I'd be like huddled on the playground and scribbling my stories. And that was always me. I never thought I would become a writer. I kind of thought that I would end up being a retire when I retired because I think that my perspective of writers back then when I was a kid was that all the writers I knew were old people, except for my friend's mom, and that was a whole different story. But I just thought, okay, so when I retire, I'll be a writer. And then I became a stay-at-home mom, and I was kind of bored because babies, they just sit there and look at you and drool and stuff. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just write. And so I started writing, and then, here I am.
As someone with a 1-year-old, I have to hard disagree on the babies just sit there and drool thing because our 1-year-old is running all over the place now.
Yeah, yeah, fair. I mean, mine did kind of her share of that as well. Like she was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
running all over and getting into things, but in terms of like my own mental stimulation,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
like there are only so many board books you can read 100 times in a row before you're like, could I please like have an actual story? And
Yeah, yep.
so yeah, she was very busy, very active, but there was just this need to have kind of that exciting story that goes beyond what we get in the board books.
Absolutely. So when did you publish your first book?
I actually took the slow path to publishing. So I got started pre-indie, like just when indie, like I started over 25 years ago. And so back then, the only path to publishing was traditional. It took me 12 years to sell my first book. So that was back 2012. And I know indie was just barely starting back then. And there was a lot of challenges to being indie at that point. And so, yeah, I went trad and took me 12 years. And so, yeah, that was where it started.
So 2012 was when your book got picked up for by a traditional publisher.
Yeah, yeah, it was when it was first published. So
Gotcha.
it's
And
one of
then
those
and then
back
you
there.
in do you still publish some books traditionally, or are you all in indie now, or are you hybrid?
So, funny question, which is hopefully not too long and boring of a story for everybody, but I had been hybrid for quite a while. And my last contract, my last book on my last contract came out last spring. And but around that time, I was going through a really messy divorce. And so I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my writing. It was again messy. His lawyer was asking stuff about my writing. I just stopped writing because like they were going after everything. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm just not. And so now I am back to looking at publishing again. And at this point, I am probably going to say that I am going to be all in on indie. If I were to get a contract, I would certainly consider it and certainly look at whether or not that's where I want to be. But, you know, when you go through a huge boom in your life, a lot of like who you are changes, and that changes who you are as a writer as well. And so I don't think I write the kinds of things anymore that are going to get me a traditional contract, to be very honest. I could be wrong. And like I said, if that happened to magically come across my desk, I would certainly consider it. But at this point, I'm really just going to stay indie.
Gotcha, that makes sense. And I think that's kind of how things are. I feel like that is the general trend with authors nowadays. It feels like most authors are going indie. If a traditional publisher comes to them with something, then they'll consider it, but it's not something that they are actively seeking out or sending around querying to tons of traditional publishers and spending a ton of time on.
Yeah, like I think that's fair because right now I don't have the time. I do have a proposal out and we'll see. I have zero hopes for it because it's a little too dark for what they want and I knew that sending it. And I'm totally cool with that. But, I think also I should add, because I know a lot of people after being trad will go indie, and because they've got like a trad horror story. I don't have trad horror stories. I actually had a great experience with trad. I enjoyed what I did. I was happy doing what I did. It's just not the model that's going to work for me moving forward.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, when you were starting out, or when you first started, when was the first book that you published indie?
Boy, maybe 2015. Yeah, probably 2015.
Gotcha. So three years after you started,
Mhm.
after you got the traditional. I'm I'm curious, what were some of the major challenges for you when you were just starting out publishing the books indie?
So, one of the things that I think was a challenge, and this is something that I still believe is true, is that my readership didn't cross over. Like everyone expected, oh, you've got all of these great books, all of these people who are reading your books. Of course, they're going to buy your indie books. And that wasn't the case. The challenge was I had to almost build a completely separate readership for that.
And do you feel that that's different now, or do you feel like the same problem still exists?
I think there is some of that same problem in that you have to be really conscious of what those readerships are in your genre and what they expect. So for me, my readers knew they would get a good read, paperback, $7, pick it up at Walmart. Boom. My indie readers, indie authors, we all know you can't sell a paperback for $7, and you certainly aren't going to get it in Walmart. And so the audience is looking for those kinds of reads. They're very different. And so you have to plan for that, and you have to consider what do those audiences read. And so, for example, my trad audience, they don't like ebooks. And anytime I have like an ebook on sale, they're like, oh, but can we get it in paper? I'm like, no, I cannot give you a paperback book for 99 cents. And they just don't get that. And so it really is just training them differently. And I think that that's going to be true for a lot. I mean, like I said, it's still true today because every time, hey, everyone, I've got a 99-cent book. Why isn't it in paper for 99 cents?
Because paper is a lot more expensive than electrons. That makes sense. That gets us into one of the main things I want to talk about today, though, which is distribution. So you were talking about, in the traditional publishing space, you were getting your books published physically and getting them in stores like Walmart, etc. But distribution is one of these tricky things to figure out as an indie because you don't have that traditional publishing house doing that. So can you tell us a little bit how distribution works when you're an indie?
So when you're an indie, distribution is something that you have to do a lot of the legwork for. And you have to go out, you have to select the stores you're going to distribute in. You've got to find the promos. You have to do the advertising. You have to do all of the work to get your book seen by readers. And in terms of getting them like in Walmart, I'm sorry, you're not gonna that's not gonna happen unless like it's a huge big breakout bestseller novel. And the reason is that, and I can say this because I also used to work for a major publisher before I worked for PublishDrive, is, the major publishers, they have sales teams that go to Walmart and they say, hey, here's our list. This is what we're publishing. Which ones do you want stocked in your store? And they do that on a corporate level. It's not, hey, I have this really cool book that I wrote. Will you please sell it in Walmart? Walmart can't do that. And so it's really important as an indie for distribution to find as many distribution channels as you possibly can and make the most of getting word out about your book because you don't have that sales team that's going to go to the different corporate locations and say, hey, will you put my book in your store? You can certainly hand sell that to small bookstores that are locally, and I encourage you to do that. But it's just a very different process. So, really thinking mindfully about, again, who are your readers? What kind of person is reading your book? What do they prefer to read their books in? Do they prefer paper? Do they prefer ebook? Do they prefer audiobook? And even going back to the paper format, like what size of books do they prefer? And what size fonts do they prefer? And the bigger distribution network you can get for yourself, the better and the more readers you're going to reach.
Do you have specific genres or examples of some of those things that you're saying authors need to consider where, paperback might be more popular or ebooks are more popular or what font sizes are good, etc., or paper sizes are good?
So, not from a general industry perspective, but I think that's really interesting, and I will dig into that at some point because I don't know that answer. I know it for the genres I've written in, and part of that is because my readers are generally, they skew older, retired, they have vision problems, they're much more traditional, and they prefer reading a print book in larger print format. That's just been my personal experience. Again, for where I'm at and what I write. And I would definitely encourage authors with their readers to do some of that A/B testing to see, because every time I say, oh no, my readers really prefer the print ebook, the print large font, whatever, someone will say, well, I write in the same genre and mine prefer the ebooks. And I'm like, okay. So some of it I do think is just the preference of your personal readers. So keeping that in mind, engaging them in your newsletters and things and saying, hey, what things do you want to see? What formats work the best for you? And also just test it in sales. And I think that's another important thing you can do if you are distributed wide. You can use your analytics and the data from what's happening with your sales to say, okay, this format is selling the best, and also breaking it down by country and saying, hey, look, ebooks are doing really well in Germany, for example. How can I capitalize on that? And figuring out what that looks like just by looking at your own personal sales data, because it is funny. I'll see authors, no, this works best. No, that works best. They're in the same genre, but for whatever reason, the sales of their individual books reflect very differently when you look at the data.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'd love to get into as, authors are considering various ways of distributing their books. PublishDrive helps authors with that. What kinds of sales and reporting or analytics do authors get from PublishDrive?
Yeah, so PublishDrive has the largest distribution network of any of the aggregators. So if you want to get your book to the widest audience possible, PublishDrive is going to be able to do that for you. And what happens with that is we've got some really detailed analytic reports where you can dial down and say, okay, this is happening in this, my sales in this country look like this, or this is happening here. And wow, for some reason, uh, this book is doing really well and I wasn't expecting it, or all of those different things you can sort by geographical region, by format, by individual titles, all of the different things you would want to sort by to get the data. What you can also do is we have a separate product from our distribution called Abacus. So if, for example, you decide, well, I don't want to put everything in PublishDrive, what you can do is you can take those reports from other books, other stores, pop them into Abacus, and that can be added to the analytics you already have from your books that are in PublishDrive.
And so Abacus, tell me a little bit more about how Abacus works. How does it integrate with other platforms or services?
Yeah, so what you do with Abacus is you upload your reports from the other platforms, you do that connection from there, and it will take and look at all the reports. A lot of small presses use us, and publishers will use that because it's great to be able to take a look at all of the different stores and regions and things like that. And when you're working with multiple authors, what Abacus can do is then it can split it out by different authors, and it can split out, let's just pretend, I think probably more relevant to everyone here today. Let's just say you and a bunch of your friends get together and say, hey, I want an anthology. Well, what you can do is you can put all the stuff into Abacus and say, okay, each of us gets, X percent, boom, boom, boom. Abacus does the calculation for you and divides up who gets what with the anthology.
Gotcha. So it can help you how to determine how to split the royalties for an
Yeah,
anthology, and
yeah.
then you would distribute those royalties yourself.
Yeah, so there's two ways. We do have a system that will let you distribute the royalties through PublishDrive. It's a little more complicated, and you'd have to get that set up with our team. And I think it might cost a little more. I don't quote me on that because we were just discussing how all of that integrated literally last week.
Oh.
But that is something, or if you're just like, nope, I'm good, I can just pay all my people, you can do it that way too. So it's really nice because you have the flexibility of doing it whichever way works for you. And that's really what PublishDrive is about, is giving authors the control of the tools and the control of their writing careers as much as possible. Like really for you to be able to say, yes, I want to do this, this, and this, or no, whatever those pieces are that you want to do, we want to put that control in the hands of the authors.
So, on that point, could you actually tell us a little bit how the process works when I want to distribute let's start with maybe ebooks, and then we can also chat about paper books and audiobooks after that. Let's say I want to distribute an ebook via PublishDrive. How exactly do I do that compared to what does the process look like not using PublishDrive?
So the nice thing with using PublishDrive is if you want to distribute a book, it's really the same as, let's just say you're going to go through Amazon, do the Amazon dashboard, etc. You go in, you sign up for your account, um, you upload your book, you fill out all the information about your book. It goes off to the magical little computer people-y. I shouldn't say people-y because it's not actual humans. The computer,
The
whatever
computer gnomes, the
system.
computer fairies.
Yes, the computer fairies. They do the review of the book to make sure that it passes all of the tests that the retailers want and it gets sent out to the retailers. I guess I should back up is when you're filling out the form, you get to choose where you want to distribute. So we have all of the different stores out there. And what you can decide is say, okay, I don't want to distribute to this store. I do want to distribute to this store. It's just a little tick box that you just turn on or off as far as whether or not you want to distribute to that store. So again, it's your control, you deciding, here's where I want to distribute, here's where I don't want to distribute. And it's all in one dashboard as opposed to going to each store individually. Can you set up a separate account with Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Kobo and Apple? Absolutely. And if you want to do that, you can and just turn them off in PublishDrive. However, why not just have them all in PublishDrive, have them all turned on, and it's one button click to get it out to all of them as opposed to having to do the work at each individual store.
And I think another important thing to talk about here is little bit with PublishDrive's pricing model too, because you could go direct to Amazon and Kobo and Barnes and Noble, etc. And try to save some money by going direct with them or something like that. But with PublishDrive, the way the pricing model works is if you're trying to reach as many retailers as possible, right? And so you might on other services or platforms, you might say, okay, well, I'm only going to distribute to the very, very, very small retailers using this platform because I only want to give up X percentage royalties on these very small platforms because it's not worth my time to go and publish my ebook direct to, some small retailer in South America or something where you only might make a couple of sales or something like that. So, uh, how does PublishDrive's pricing model work? Because I think that plays into this too.
It does. It does. And I think that's really the great benefit of our pricing model because I've heard over the years people will say, oh, well, PublishDrive, the pricing, it's so expensive. It's actually not when you take into account that you pay a flat monthly fee or a flat annual fee. And it's pricing per book. You know every month what you're going to spend on your distribution. And everybody else, all of the other aggregators, rather than doing that flat fee, they take a percentage. Well, it is not cost effective. Everyone knows you're going to sell the most books at Amazon. It's not cost effective to give someone else 10% of what you're making on Amazon. But with PublishDrive, since you get everything you make from Amazon because you've already paid your fee. Now we're talking more cost effective because you're spending less time. You're not going to all of these different stores to upload your books. And I just saw in the comments the question, what happens when you want to update your manuscript or metadata, which is actually a perfect question for what we're talking about here, because you do it once. You do it one time within the PublishDrive platform, and that update goes to all the stores. As opposed to I decided to save some money by going with somebody who's taking a percentage of what I make. So the stores that I earn the most money at, I'm just going to do myself. Now suddenly you're updating your manuscript, you're updating your metadata in 5 or 6 different places. And like, just think about how much time that takes you to do it for one book and for all the different stores. Now also think about people with large catalogs and how that changes. And again, how much time that takes. If you just have one book, okay, that's not going to take you a lot of time. But suddenly, when you're getting into publishing multiple books, then that becomes okay, now wait a second. Is this the best use of my time? And I was just having this conversation with my boss last week where he was like, well, wait, okay, so you spent an hour figuring this thing out to save 20 bucks. You make more than 20 bucks an hour. Why did you waste an hour doing that? And I'm like, I don't know, because it seemed like the smart choice at the time. And so sometimes you really do have to sit down and really think through, okay, what is my time worth? And I was talking to an author at a conference a few weeks ago. Gosh, no, it's been like a month now. Time flies. But, he was saying, if I'm not, my wife has already told me if I don't make X dollars an hour on a task, I'm not allowed to do that task because she knows my time writing the book is worth that amount of money. And I think that's really smart because we as authors don't often think of that. And so we waste our time on busy work trying to maintain and to save a buck here and to save a buck there, but it's costing you money to do it that way. And so really think about all of the different things that are important to you, what's important to you, and why.
Yeah, I think those are all considerations that you absolutely have to make when you're thinking about how you want to distribute your book. Someone also was wondering when they and please anyone is welcome to drop questions into the chat as well and we'll try and get them answered here. I of course have my own giant list of questions, but I want to focus on whatever questions that you all might have. So feel free to drop them in the chat. This question is referring to when you're updating your metadata, that will update that across retailers. How does that work specifically for controlling the listing on Amazon and thinking about things like A plus content?
So we don't have the ability to do the A plus content on the website right now. We are working on some things with that just because of we're doing some things to work on those integrations. However, you can, for example, run your Amazon ads directly through your PublishDrive dashboard, which I think is, again, really cool because it's giving you that opportunity to save your time, save your money by not having to go and spend all the time doing all the different platforms. It's all in that same platform. So I think that is really nice. A lot of people have told me that they really like running their ads through the PublishDrive platform.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's definitely something I want to talk more about is on the marketing and promotion side of things. But someone else had a question about dealing with Amazon's different categories and search terms and stuff as well. Is that part done
Yes,
through
that's that you can do through our
PublishDrive?
platform.
Okay, awesome. And I also wanted to ask, so we sort of covered the ebook distribution process. It's very similar to if you were going direct with Amazon, where you'd essentially upload your book, file, your description, title, all of that sort of stuff. You can just do it through PublishDrive, and then PublishDrive will farm that out to all of the various retailers, etc. What about with the process with distributing paperbacks and audiobooks? How does that work through PublishDrive? Is that a very similar process
Yep,
or
it's
is it
it's
different?
really a very similar process. You upload the books and it ends up doing all of the formatting and things, you put in the information.
Gotcha. So for example, with an audiobook, I would go and I would find my own narrator, and then I would get the files from them, and then I would just upload that to PublishDrive, and then PublishDrive would distribute those audiobook files to the various retailers.
Yes, that is correct. Although we do have a lot of retailers that accept AI audio, and we are also partnered with Apple for their AI audio. So if you wanted to be part of the Apple AI audio program, you could just select the box. Again, it is opt-in, so you have to make that decision to do that.
Gotcha. Interesting. And when you see a hand raised, anyone that has any questions, please feel free just drop them in the chat, and then I'll ask them. When you select those AI audiobook narration options through PublishDrive, do those retailers each make their own AI narrated version, or are you uploading your own AI narrated version?
Yeah, so it depends on the retailer. Most of the retailers, yes, you're going to upload your own AI narrated version. The Apple AI is the one that Apple is going to create that for you.
Gotcha. And then for the print books, how does that work when a customer orders a print book? Does PublishDrive have their own print on demand service, or are you guys working with another company to do that fulfillment?
Yeah, we work with other print on demand companies.
Gotcha. And you guys have different partnerships, so whatever makes the most sense on terms of fulfillment for that particular
Right,
book.
right, exactly.
Got it. Okay. Do authors have any sort of control on that print on demand? Let's say there are two providers that meet sort of the requirements of how I want my book printed and all of that stuff. Can I choose between which
Absolutely.
potential company would do that fulfillment process?
Yes, you get that choice.
Okay, sweet. And which companies do you guys work with for those?
So, it's going to be the same main ones in terms of like Ingram Spark, Amazon. We do have another company called Repro India that we work with.
Someone said, if you wrote a book that traditional publishers would want, have you looked to see which way makes you the most money, indie versus trad, thinking about all the time you spend in promoting your own books?
So I am going to say that it's going to depend on your situation and your circumstances. And the reason I say that is my trad books have always made me more money. Now, other people have had the opposite experience and they're like, yeah, I would never go trad because my indie books make too much money. So it really is going to be based on what your experience is and how that works for you. And so I would just say, really take a look at what is going to be the value for you and for your career. Like you're talking about the time you spend in promoting your own books. For example, with trad, I don't have control over when my books come out. And so, like, and that's part of why I'm just like, yeah, at this point, I don't know that I would go back to that because it would take me probably that book wouldn't come out for 2 years if I got that contract today. And if I wanted to do it indie, I can put that book out tomorrow if I wanted to. And so, like, that's the consideration you have to make.
Right. Is the 2 years of lost income that you would make as an indie, is it made up for by the traditional coming out later and running
Right,
through all of
right.
their
And
processes and
I
all
always
that
get
stuff?
pretty good advances. So, like, that does kind of make up for it. But again, do I want to wait 2 years?
Right. Yeah, and there's so many other considerations. It's a really hard question to answer in a general statement because every traditional publisher is different, every book deal is going to be different. All of that stuff is incredibly variable. But talking about marketing and doing all of the things that you have to do as an indie, I'm curious what ways can you market your books with PublishDrive, or how does PublishDrive help authors market their books? We talked a little bit about it just briefly, that you can manage your Amazon ads through PublishDrive's dashboard, but what other ways can you market your books using PublishDrive?
So, one of the things that we have that is really cool that I think a lot of people don't know about, and even I was talking to an author recently who is with PublishDrive and didn't realize this, that a lot of stores like Kobo, Barnes and Noble, Apple, etc., some of the smaller stores, they do in-store promotions. And so what happens is, if you go to the Apple Books page, you'll see here are some great books, blah, blah, blah. Some of those are going to be spots the publisher pays for to put on there, and some of those are going to be part of their promotions program. What people don't realize is you can get those through PublishDrive. And so what happens is that you go to your PublishDrive dashboard and it will say, hey, for example, there's a Valentine's promo coming up. Do you have a book that fits with this theme? If so, apply for these promos. And so all you have to do literally is check a button. You don't have to go through, because I know authors who will try to do the promos directly with the stores, they have to do the reaching out or they have to be reached out to. This, you just go see, okay, what is my book eligible for? Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to pick that. The other thing we do is we have a deal with Written Word Media. So some of their promos you can actually get through PublishDrive for free or at a reduced cost, which I think is really great. You're not going to get all of their promos, but let's just say, hey, you were thinking about using a big paid thing with Written Word Media, not sure how it's going to go. Well, this is a way to try it because you've got a free or reduced cost option to test the waters and see if that kind of promotion works for you and your books.
For those authors that are maybe not familiar with written word media, what kinds of promotions do they do?
So Written Word Media,
How does that system work?
yeah, they are like a newsletter system where they have a whole bunch of readers and they send out great newsletters and e-blasts about free or sale books and different releases and everything, so that if someone is, so the reader list, it's a list of all readers. And so what happens is that your book is getting put in the inbox of readers who may or may not have ever seen your work before. So their lists are pretty extensive and they have a lot of different readers that get their email lists. So really a nice opportunity just to put your books in front of actual readers. And the lists are generally based on genres and topics and things. So it's not like you're going to get a romance novel sent to a bunch of military history enthusiasts, for example.
Right. Yeah. They're kind of like a mini bookbub, right? So for those
Right.
authors that are familiar with BookBub or BookBub deals, where you are paying to get your book into one of BookBub's newsletters, whether that's for, science fiction readers or for fantasy readers or romance readers, etc. Written Word Media does something very similar. They've got a bunch of newsletters and you can pay to be a part of them. And so you can pay or you can join some of those promotions for free by applying through your PublishDrive dashboard. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds great. So you can through the PublishDrive dashboard, it sounds like you can manage your Amazon ads. You can apply for retailers promotions. For example, Amazon or sorry, Apple is maybe having like it's springtime romance promo or something like that. You could submit your book to be a part of that. And then the third option would be applying or paying for the promos through written word media. Are there any other ways that you would recommend authors can promote their books via PublishDrive?
So those are the main channels that we have. So right now we don't have any other options for promoting, but I think those are really great places to start and they're free. They're part of your PublishDrive membership, which is really great because that saves you on a lot of the legwork and having to do that work yourself. And so what you could do is, if you know you've got these PublishDrive promos coming up, how can you then use that in your marketing and co-marketing with other authors, things like that, so that you can get the most bang for that promotional buck?
What tactics and strategies do you have around promotions that you would recommend to authors if they're focused on a book launch, or perhaps they're focused on trying to get more reviews in order to promote it?
Yeah, I think there are two. Number one, I really encourage authors to work with other authors to share those promos, which I know you're a big fan of. Um, like really taking advantage of tools like Story Origin and working with authors to um, band together about getting that word out, newsletter swaps, things like that. Those are going to be really important for you to be able to, um, share that with other authors and their readership because, you know, as authors, we can only write so fast to please our readers. And it's really great to have author friends that we can co-promote with. And so really take advantage of those promotional tools and figuring out how, as authors, we can work together. And I think that to me is the number one tip is get together with other authors in your genre and figure out that co-promotion and say, hey, I have a new book coming out. Who can feature me in your newsletter? Who can, what promos are out there that I could be a part of? Because that is really going to help you build your readership. And it's also going to help your author friends because they need something that's of value to give their readers, in between those releases. So it's a win-win for everybody. And I really do think that paid advertising right now is really what's moving the needle for most authors. I see a lot of people who will say, my book's not doing well and I don't know why. And it's like, well, are you doing ads? And they're like, no, I don't want to do ads. And everyone I know that's making money at publishing right now is running ads. So I like, make sure that you are taking advantage of both things. Like, absolutely do the free stuff with your friends and those free promos, because I do think that does move the needle. But ultimately, I think sometimes you do have to take that step and do the ad strategy.
I think you have to have a multi-pronged approach, and getting started, as you said, with cross promotions is a great way to get started because it's cheap, easy, and free, right? Or you don't have to figure out bidding strategies or some complicated ads dashboard or targeting or metrics and stuff. It's just, hey, is there another author in my genre that has a similar audience to mine? Hey, I'll promote one of your books in one of my upcoming newsletters if you promote one of my books in one of your upcoming newsletters. And then all you have to do from there is just drop the link to their book in your newsletter. There's nothing super complicated to figure out there.
Right.
And
And Origin makes a lot of that really
yep.
easy for people.
And it also depends on where you are at as an author as well, right? When your backlist is super small, you only have one book out, it can be very difficult to make those ads profitable because you are bidding for those impressions with those ads against authors that might have a backlist of 20 or 30 books like yourself.
Right. Yeah. So
And so
it is hard.
yeah. So naturally an author with, 20 or 30 books can spend a bit more on their ads because they can depend on X percentage of readers reading through the first book and then buying, book two, three, four, etc. So great to get started with cross promotion, and then also adding advertising as a key strategy is definitely another pillar of being an indie author as well, and marketing your books. So that is, yeah, absolutely a key part of many authors' strategies who are doing very well with it. I did have another question from an audience member that said, do authors get an email to notify them of new promos to check out, or do they have to keep checking their dashboard on PublishDrive?
So it is both. We do try to send out emails with the information on promos that are coming up. But here's the thing is that we all know our inboxes get overloaded. They do get full and or something goes to spam and shouldn't. So I do encourage people to check even if they're not seeing it, because sometimes the email goes out and they don't get it, or it goes into spam, or they don't see it in time. So just make sure you're checking your dashboard every once in a while because you just never know.
How frequently would you say that new promos get listed, or how often should authors check for that kind of thing? Is that like a
So
once a month kind of a thing,
yeah,
or?
It's usually about once a month, but we also try as soon as we get something, like if we're trying once a month to do it, but maybe mid-month Apple says, "Hey, we've got this great deal going on. We're not going to wait the 2 weeks to let you guys know about it."
Got it. That makes sense.
Also, the written word media stuff is always ongoing. So even if there isn't something particularly that month that would apply to you in your book, you can still always apply for a written word media promo.
Got it. Someone else asked, what about asking AI to lay out a marketing plan? And I think, I would probably say that you wouldn't necessarily need AI to lay out a marketing plan just because there's probably a pretty standard set of things that you ought to do with every launch that are just sort of best practices or recommended that you can sort of just have a blueprint for. And I'm curious, do you have a sort of blueprint for your book launches?
So actually, I do use AI for marketing plans.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Uh, yeah, so I co-host a podcast called The Brave New Bookshelf, which is all about AI in publishing. So one of the things that I love doing is talking with the AI and seeing what else can we do for a marketing plan, because you're absolutely right. There are standard things you should do with every book for a marketing plan regardless. But what I have found is that AI is also very clever at figuring out and seeing things that maybe you didn't see, or giving suggestions that are actually really clever. And you're like, oh, wait, I didn't know I could do that. Oh, hey, that, like that's also a very cool thing. And sometimes the AI will even suggest maybe a different timeline than what I was thinking. And so, it's always good to have that as a resource.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the things that are part of your sort of standard blueprint for a book launch? And then what are some of the surprising things that AI has you've used the suggestion and added to part of your launch plans?
So I think for me, standard is just figuring out what newsletter timing looks like, what social media timing looks like, and having all of those things in place, having that launch information already to go. But then sometimes, and also your author friends and your influencers and things like that who are going to promote your book, making sure they have all of that information, um, and having that all together. But like some of the stuff AI has suggested is, for example, maybe reaching out to various groups that might be interested in your book that you hadn't thought of. And so I think that's really where it's been really interesting, is to say, oh, have you thought about doing this kind of marketing, or maybe this theme around your book that you weren't seeing as maybe a theme that your book actually has and people would be interested in.
Yeah, that is an interesting. I mean, I do think that there is a sort of standard set of so the standard set of things that you talk about with a launch, it would be, you know, obviously promoting it in your own newsletters to your own mailing list, and then promoting it via your own social media accounts. The third thing there was cross promoting it with your author friends, like arranging those newsletter swaps or joining those group promos where all, authors in your genre, you're helping each other out by promoting each other's books. Another thing there, I think, would be probably if there are any of those retailer promos that your book can be a part of at launch that you could join on or perhaps early after your launch, because it might be tricky if your book is not published yet to be able to apply to those, and then joining and then applying for those, those paid newsletter promo spots, whether it's, through PublishDrive using something like written word media or applying for those bookbub deals, etc. And then with using AI, giving you potential suggestions as well for how to market that book, what some of the language you might want to use would be, positioning your book, all that stuff. And I think that transitions as well into PublishDrive has a metadata generator that can give you some of that, right?
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things, I've been an author obviously for a long time, but I've also worked in publishing for a long time as well. Because I'm old. But, one of the struggles I think authors have is finding the right keywords and the right metadata for their books and the right book descriptions. And I've done a lot of consulting with authors on this where they're like, why isn't my book selling? What should I do? Et cetera, et cetera. And almost always it's because they have the metadata wrong, they have their book description wrong. I tell the story, so I apologize if any of you have heard it before, but I was reading this, I saw this book on Amazon. It looked great. I bought it, downloaded it, was going to read it on the plane. I'm reading on the plane, and it is not the book I bought. Like, it is not what that description said. And I was like, what the heck? And I checked. I'm like, no, this is the right book. I'm like, all right, well, I'm on an airplane. I can't just find something else, or I mean, I guess I could have, but I'm on the airplane, so I'm kind of stuck. And I went ahead and continued reading the book. I have a very big sickness, which is I can't not finish a book. Once I have started a book, I can't not finish it. The only reason I will not finish a book is if it's a paperback or something and I lose it. And the thing is that I'm reading this book and it was nothing like what this description said. Finally, I got towards like three-quarters of the way through, and guess what? Finally, the thing that was the book description, it's in the book. But guess what? It is a minor scene. And I'm like, what the heck? And I read the book. It was a terrible book, nothing to do with the description. And we do that all the time as authors because we think our book is about this one amazing scene that we've written, but it's about this whole other thing. And so I've consulted with a lot of authors, and this was not an author I was consulting with, but who's had this problem. And I'm like, all right, let's fix your description. Like that's step one. And so what PublishDrive did is they said, hey, how can we help authors sell books? Because people will say, oh, PublishDrive doesn't work because I didn't sell any books. I'm like, well, what marketing did you do? Like, all of these different things, is the description in alignment with the book, and the biggest thing for discoverability, of course, is your metadata. It is your description. And so we created a tool where you upload your book and the AI searches your book for metadata, keywords, and helps you write that book description. And it's based on what's actually in the book. So, for example, if you're writing a book about, fairies or something, and you don't know that it's about fairies. I don't know why you wouldn't know it's about fairies, but again, like this book that I read on the plane that makes me so mad. And again, I work with a lot of authors who have the same problem where they think, oh, well, my book isn't this. Well, actually, yeah, it is. And so the AI pulls out those keywords, it pulls out those categories, and it's based on what's going to be what's selling on Amazon right now. There's a connection with the algorithm there that will look at, okay, here are the keywords that are selling well in Amazon right now. Here are the keywords in your book. Compare the two. Boom, this is what you should use, which is really great because another problem I see is that people will put their books in the wrong category. I was talking to an author one time who her book, she couldn't figure out why it wasn't selling. I'm like, well, why is it in the LGBTQ category? And she said, well, LGBTQ people will enjoy reading my book. And I said, but is it about them? Does it deal with the issues they deal with? And she's like, well, it's just general life issues. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. Like, I mean, you can do that. Amazon lets you do that, but why not have that assistance in finding out the best categories and keywords for your books? And so I think that I think that the AI is really good at helping you figure that out because we oftentimes can't see the forest for the trees. And we often don't know those key selling points of the story. Because remember, your description, your metadata, all of that, that's what sells your book. That is your marketing tool. And, we talk about our marketing plans, we talk about how we're going to market the book, but the best marketing plan in the world isn't going to sell a book if it doesn't have a good book description, if the metadata is not right. The people aren't going to be able to find your book to get it.
And how does that metadata generator, that's the metadata generator tool on PublishDrive, right? How does the pricing work for that?
So the pricing on the metadata tool generator is basically a credit-based system. And so it is separate from your PublishDrive subscription. And this is really important because a lot of people say, well, I don't distribute through PublishDrive, so I can't use it. We purposely made this a standalone product that you can do separately. One of the things, actually, there's two things I want to mention. One, because I forgot to mention it, when you upload your book, it's really important for you to know we do not use that to train the AI. Your books, your data, your information is never used to train AI. And that's important for me to say because I know people have concerns about that, but also because that is a big commitment that PublishDrive has. So going back to the pricing, it's basically credit based. So we give you credits free to start. We do give a free entry point into PublishDrive at every point because we want you to be able to try it and use it and make sure you like it. So after you've used up your free credit with PublishDrive, what'll happen is that you can then purchase top-up credits. And those top-up credits are, you buy them, I think they're in $5 packs, but basically $5 is enough to do an entire book. And so you're able to write that whole thing to get all that metadata, all your book descriptions, all of that for about $5, which is pretty cool because fun fact, and also partially why, like, I get this from the perspective of being an author, is that it is hard to write your own book description. I was paying $100 book description for people to be able to write my book description for me because I couldn't. I mean, I can write a book description. I can, but like, I couldn't see the forest for the trees and I wanted the best book description for my book. And so I really wanted another set of eyes to do that for me. And like I said, I was paying $100 to do that. And now it's $5 on PublishDrive.
Where can people go to get any questions answered that we weren't able to get to today?
Yeah, so go to publishdrive.com. There's a lot of great information on the website. We have a really wonderful, oh gosh, why can't I think of the word? We have a whole repository of information. So if you put in the search bar what you're looking for, what your questions are, it does a really good job of breaking down what the answers are, what you can find. And then, of course, you can always reach out to me and I will help out with that.
How would people reach out to you?
Yeah, just email me, danica@publishdrive.com.
Awesome. Sweet. Any other places that we ought to follow you or PublishDrive or?
Yeah, so first of all, those of you with the AI questions, please follow Brave New Bookshelf. We've got a Facebook page, we've got our podcasts for YouTube, and we're on all the podcast channels. So if you want to listen to podcasts, make sure you listen to that. Obviously, PublishDrive, all of our social media channels on PublishDrive, and then for me, Danica Favorite, pretty much Danica Favorite everywhere. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming out and hanging out with us today. We will see you all in the next one.